Hello, everybody. This is Lee Cole 3 from the Lee Cole 3 podcast with my partner, James Proctor. James, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good, Lee. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing real good, and I'm really looking forward to this. There's a lot of work in this video that we did, as you know, and we're going
Hmm.
back to the 1800s.
Yeah.
And this is a history of a certain mobster. We have, I've had different opinions of this gentleman. And but this isn't about whether he was an informant. We know he was an informant.
Right.
Okay, this is about history of a mafioso family, which I find very fascinating, and that's why I wanted to discuss it with you
Yeah.
because you know, James, we see a lot of people in the mob and stuff, and you see people that come from a long lineage and history. Does anybody, Michael Leonardo? I mean, have you ever seen anybody that has that type of lineage way back like that?
Yeah, I never seen that much of a lineage. It goes back hundreds of years and all the in Sicily, and I just find it really fascinating and the story of his grandfather coming over to the country and all that. So it's pretty interesting stuff that we'll be covering.
Right. And when you think about it though, then he gets married in with the Frappianos,
Hmm.
another family with a lot of history.
Yes.
So Mikey Scars is always around that life.
Yes.
You'll hear Sammy Gravano make a lot of remarks and stuff, but Sammy Gravano has not been around the life that this guy was around this life when he actually was born. I mean, he was literally, when they say born into the life, he was
Hmm.
born into the life. Would you say that?
Yeah, most definitely, and that's really when you learn about his lineage and history, you could see how it would have been um, difficult for the decisions he made and how it would create a lot of problems for
Oh,
him with his
he came from
family.
a strict, a Sicilian family, and
Yeah.
when you think about it, though, it's like you said, he made that decision to be an informant. So he made a
Hmm.
decision that pretty much brought that family's lineage to an end.
Yeah.
That
It
was it. That
definitely is.
that's like it doesn't go beyond that anymore because the mob isn't what it used to be, and the family
Right.
now has wants no part of that type of life. I'm
Right.
assuming.
Hmm.
And okay, so so we know that Mikey was born in June 1955,
Right.
but there was a lot, and he was born in Brooklyn and
Hmm.
Bensonhurst, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But up before, there was a long period of time of how this all came about. So let's
Yeah.
get into that, okay?
Sure.
So start talking to me. It's you grab the ball now.
Yeah, so yeah, that's a Sicilian town called Bisacchino. It's in Sicily. It's part of the Palermo. I guess you'd call it like a state or a province of Sicily. And so it's been around for about 1,000 years. It's an agricultural center. It's got a lot of rain that occurs there. It's on a hill, and so what's interesting about that area that's besides the all of the agriculture that goes on there is that the town was owned by local lords until about 1778, and then it became a property of the church. And so there's an archbishop that pretty much owned that. And anyway, the mafia, Bisacchino, like I said, is only about 10,000 people. Now it's maybe 5,000. It's been losing. So there was a lot of poverty in the past. It was really a place that
It's
had a
not one of
lot of.
those fancy go visit it because it's beautiful. The buildings are beautiful, but I'm sure they're
Yes.
old.
Yeah,
They look
they're
very old.
very yeah, they're very old, and it's close to another uh, town that people have heard of called Corleone. So that's where in The Godfather the name Corleone came from, and so uh, there was a rich history of mafiosos from that area, and so the most famous one's a guy named Vito Cassio Ferro.
and Don Vito Cassioferro,
Hmm.
and he was I guess he was a big thing in the Black Hand, wasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. So he helped found the Black Hand, and he came over in the late 1800s. He was actually was running a lot of the area there in Basiquino and that area. But he really knew the grandfather and great grandfather of Mikey Scars.
Yeah, and wasn't
Michael
this
Dileonardo.
oh, and wasn't this guy? Didn't they say this guy was? It was a famous murderer. It was Joe
Hmm.
Petrosino. He was a
Yes.
cop from New York that went there and did some investigating. I believe
Yeah.
he was stabbed to death,
Yes.
and they found the body. They could. It never got solved, and he
No.
said that this guy was involved with it. And this is the
Hmm.
cop. This was on America's Most Wanted. This cop, and there's a
Yeah.
movie. There's a movie made about it. There's a Netflix special about this cop, and
Hmm.
they never solved his murder, did they?
No, no, they didn't. And so what had happened was that Don Vito Cassioferro, he actually, he came to New York. He was only here for a few years, but in the few years that he was here, he actually had helped to create the Black Hand. So he was originally part of the Morello gang in Harlem, but then in 1904 he got he had to go back to Sicily. Whenever.
Did this cop Petrosino want to follow him or something? Or
Yeah, exactly. Because there was you see what happened is Don Vito had been accused of murder, and so they had blocked his citizenship, and then he just went back to Sicily, and so the cop Joe Petrosino, and he's like the very first pioneer that was out there trying to
to go
take
after the
on the
mafia?
mafia.
Yes,
Hmm.
he was, and he was
Yeah,
very brave cop because he took
yeah.
him on in the streets of New York too. But you know what? To
Hmm.
go to Sicily like that and leave yourself by yourself, wide in the
Mm,
open, no bodyguards,
yeah.
nobody with you. I mean,
Nope.
that's when the guy figured he was a lot tougher than what he was.
Right, right. So what happened when he went back? He became very powerful in Sicily. So he became more or less what they call a boss of bosses. They don't use that term in the Sicilian mafia, but he, besides being ruling everything there in the town of Bisacchino, he also had areas like Bergio, Campo Fiorito, Contessa Intilina, Corleone, even parts of the districts of Palermo. And so this guy was the most powerful mafioso in the early 1900s. And he ended up, if you know the history of Sicily and Italy, fascism started rising in
Right.
the 20s, and Mussolini got into power, and he started putting all the mafiosos in prison. And so in 1926, Don Vito, along with 150 other mafiosos, got rounded up there in Corleone and Bisacchino. And so they indicted Don Vito. He participated in 20 murders, 8 attempted murders, 5 robberies with violence, 37 acts of extortion, and 53 other offenses, including physical violence and threats. And so they convicted and sentenced him to life in prison in 1930, and they said he ended up dying in prison during World War II in
Wow.
1943.
Well, that's some
Yeah,
interesting stuff. And
yeah,
people don't really, one of the most famous Hollywood people ever came from Bissaquino, Sicily, and that
yes,
was Frank Capra. Now, Frank Capra made It's a Wonderful Life. He
mm-hmm,
made It Happened One Night.
yes.
Plus, I mean, he didn't just make great movies. This guy made absolute classics.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
I
he
mean, there's
did.
so many of them. I was reading the list of movies he made. It's incredible. Okay,
Yeah,
so then how does Dileonardo? How does that family start here?
yeah. So what happened was that. So anyway, this guy Don Vito knew his grandfather was Vincenzo di Leonardo, and
Yes.
so they have him and his great grandfather come to the U.S. So at this time, the grandfather Vincenzo di Leonardo was only 15 years old, and so he
Oh,
came with
he's
his
just a young
grandfather.
guy. All right.
He was just a young guy, but Don Vito. And so at this point, you remember I said Don Vito goes back to Sicily in 1904. And
One thing real quick. So Mikey
yeah,
Scars, no excuses. This was on his. Where did you get this picture from?
yeah, I got that from his Patreon page where they have images and
Okay, so I
photos.
hope that he doesn't mind that you took it. I didn't do it. It was
Hmm.
all him. So if you're going to be mad at anybody, it's all his fault.
Yeah, there's a lot of good photos. If someone wants to join his Patreon, you got a lot of these older photos. Yeah, well, I'm just trying
Okay.
to protect us. I don't want to get
People
struck.
are going to go, oh, they're promoting his channel.
Well,
Oh,
I just don't want to get us
yeah.
struck.
Okay, so
No,
tell
I
us.
know. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, his grandfather Vincenzo came here in 1895 with his father, and Don Vito had actually sent for them to come to the USA or to New York and Harlem, and so when the grandfather and great grandfather came to the U.S., they had a guy that was, at the time, just, understand these mafiosos in the U.S., these Sicilians that were coming over, they started early. They were in their teens and 20s, and they became bosses at that age. You didn't see that later on
Right.
in 30s, 40s, or whatever. But anyway, there was a guy named Salvatore D'Aquila. His
Uh,
name Toto.
Toto was his nickname, right?
Yep, yep. And he was he was the first boss of what became the Gambino crime family. And so anyway, later on, but that's what it was known as
Later,
later.
yeah.
Yeah, later. But anyway, they were part of like the Morellos and all of that. And so Dacula was someone that was like a mentor to Michael's grandfather,
Right.
Vincenzo.
And what happened to him?
Yeah, so he ended up, there was a lot of wars in the 20s, and so Dacula ended up getting killed in October 10th of 1928. And so, Dacula, by that time, he had broken away from the Morello crime family and formed his own family. And so he brought Vincenzo Leonardo into that Dacula Brooklyn faction. So you
And
remember
where
they
did
were in Harlem originally. So, Dacula was able to get a Brooklyn faction, and then Vincenzo, the grandfather, became a capo.
where did Mikey Scar's father come into play here? I mean,
Yeah, he was born in 1911. He wasn't really involved in the mafia. So, that party, he really wasn't involved in it.
well, that's something that
Yeah,
when you really think about it. Okay,
right.
so let's get so we got okay. So we gave you the basic early history. Okay, we're not going to
Yeah.
stand here and give any more history lessons. We found it out. It's fascinating, and I gave all the words to James because I'm a
Hmm.
chicken, and James, good job with that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we moved on now, and so let's go to the birth of Mikey Scars. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
and pick it up
So,
from there.
yeah, so, Mikey Scars, we know, was born in 1955, and he was, so, his grandfather, Vincenzo, was actually helping to take care of the Dacula's son
Well,
in family.
after they were
After they
killed.
killed, yeah, because Dacula Salvatore or Toto, he was killed in 1928, and so Vincenzo Di Leonardo was taking care of the kids and the family, and so
And that's
around
just
this.
separate from Mikey's birth.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just
yeah.
something you
That
left
was
out. Okay.
right, right. So I was just bringing that, but yeah, I mean, Michael became, he was born, and he had, all these his grandfather and folks that were in the life,
He had a
and
lot of
met
people around him.
a lot of people. But he started off his life, he's going to school. He was an athlete. He was someone that, just just a kind of a regular kid, but he just had a lot of the
And he had something
mafiosos.
happen to him that happened to me, but mine was at 3 years of age. He
Hmm.
got bit in the face by a dog.
Yep, he was 10 years old and got bit in the face by a dog, and then that's how the nickname Mikey Scars came about.
And so so at one point, didn't he meet Carlo Gambino?
Yeah, yeah. So as a young boy, he met Carlo Gambino several times. He would go over to his grandfather's house, and he met him a few times, and also met, he was close to Jerry Dacula and Paulie Zach, Paul Zacharia, or at the different social clubs and
Now,
that
Paul
sort of
Zachary,
thing.
wasn't that like a mentor to him also?
It was, yeah. It was a mentor. He was an old timer, and so even as a kid, what would happen is, Paul and Jerry, they would give him money to run errands. So basically, like his grandfather would want to, for Mikey to take stuff to the social clubs where Paulie Zach was, or Jerry Dacula, and so they would give him money for doing that. Give.
And Paulie Zachariah had him. That's when he started committing crimes and stuff.
Yes.
Paulie was mentoring vandalism and enforcement and
Right. Yeah,
assaults and all that
exactly.
stuff.
Yeah, he was getting involved in a lot of the violent street gangs as a teenager, and so what I could tell is that he got in a lot of fights, but Mikey, was able to handle himself
And that's what
pretty
you
well.
and that's what you hear. You hear that Mikey Scars never killed nobody. He
Hmm.
wasn't a tough guy or anything like that.
Right.
So he was in the streets as a kid. So
Yeah.
if you're growing up in the streets in Brooklyn as a kid, Bensonhurst,
Hmm.
those tough areas with
Yeah.
those tough kids, you know how
Hmm.
to handle yourself. And this is not me sticking up for him. This just fact. He's a young kid growing up in the mean streets of Brooklyn. Is what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
And yeah, and in fact, in that time, when he was around 15 or 16 years old, he's actually got to know Sammy Gravano, because Sammy Gravano was from that area. In the early 70s, he was part of the Colombo family. He was an associate, but he had, we know the story of of Sammy, but they were close. They knew each other, ran across each other a lot, in Bath Avenue, different places there in Bensonhurst, and so they knew each other.
And then when he was 21 years old, they
Hmm.
said that's when he started really hanging out, like at restaurants, discotheques,
Yes.
and stuff like that. And that was like 1976.
Yeah,
So he was
exactly.
21 years
So
old at this time.
yeah, so Carlo Gambino, like I said, they was real close to his grandfather, but he died in 75, and then Big Paul took over as boss, and so it was interesting. One of the things I found interesting about Paul was, you always hear about him later in the 80s, where he's pretty much housed up in the White House, and people come to see him, but he doesn't really get out too much because he was afraid of, the police were going to see him or take photos or whatever. But, when he first became boss, he would go to the Veterans and Friends Social Club, and on Sundays and Thursdays, and all the capos would actually go there to see Big Paul.
And Paul was it Paul Sicario that introduced uh, John Gotti to Mikey?
Yeah, so and that happened a little bit later, and so what
It happened at
happened
the
was
meeting in 70, 78, and 79.
79. Yeah,
They used his
so
basement for a meeting.
yes,
And
exactly. So yeah, one of the things interesting on that was, so John Gotti was sent by the commission to go to the different family capos and tell them that drug dealing was prohibited under penalty of death. And anyway, Paul asked, Zachariah, Paulie Zach is what his nickname was, asked Mikey if they could use his grandfather's basement to have the meeting. And so, yeah, they had three of the Gambino crews there. So Tato's crew was there, Jimmy Brown's, and Paulie Zach's was there, and they met with John Gotti that day, and then Paulie actually introduced John Gotti to Mikey Scars. And what's interesting is that when John was leaving, Paulie said to Mikey Scars, "See that guy? He's going to be our next boss."
Was
And
that
this
Paulie
was
Sakara? Was that Paulie Sakara
Mhm.
that said that?
Yeah, exactly. Paulie Zach said, "See that guy? He's going to be our next boss," pointing to John Gotti. And this was like 6 or 7 years before Gotti became boss. But
Yeah, this is 78, 79, and
yeah,
that's before. Yeah, but at that time, Gotti was becoming very known and respected on the street by the guy in the street. The guy in the street
yeah,
loved Gotti, is what it came down to.
yeah. And he was pretty much. He had just gotten out of prison. He had done the little stint in prison, and then he had also pretty much had been a captain. He became a captain himself pretty early on. But Mikey never saw John again until John became boss in January of '86. But he
And
met
then
him that time and was impressed with him.
now he had an older brother that got killed. Is that
Yes.
is that correct? Now, I have a picture of him, and this guy looks just like Mikey Scars. I
Yeah.
found it. I found it under Robert DiBernardo. And
Hmm.
if this is the wrong picture, I'm sorry, but this is the only picture I could find. It looks a lot like Mikey Scars, but it is his brother, so I'll put it up anyway.
Yeah.
And so let's just presume that's Robert DiBernardo. Let's talk
Yeah.
about what happened to him, because at this time, Mikey was just beginning out in the family. He didn't really have the power,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
he was with the Columbos. He was with the Scarper crew. And tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So Bucky was a nickname of Robert Dileonardo, and so he was an associate, like you said, for the Colombo crime family. And then on July 16th, 1981, Bucky was killed in a mob-related shooting, and so there was involving some sort of drug dispute, and so they had found his body next to a field on Staten Island. So this was like this popular murder site for gangland killings, and so there's a lot of information from a guy named Carmine Imbriali, and
Yes.
so he was with the 13th Avenue boys, and so he knew
Yes. That was a
Bucky.
very tough group of guys, by the way, the 13th Avenue
Yes.
boys.
Yeah, exactly. And so, according to Carmine, they found his body right across from the old Russo's diner where all the wise guys would hang out. And so, what happened was they pulled into someone's driveway, shot Bucky, and left him there. They didn't hide it. And so,
And then there was some drugs. Now, this is what this is
Carmine, yeah.
Ambrielli says. He said that
Hmm.
they found drugs in the car and stuff, but that back then when mobs killed people to throw them off scent, they would put drugs in the car, make it look like a
Exactly.
drug dealer was killed.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
the
They wanted to
follow,
make it look like a drug deal went bad or
and the
something.
following day in the paper, what did it say? It said a drug dealer was killed.
Yep,
So, but listen,
exactly.
maybe they were his drugs. I'm just telling you because I don't, what do we know about Carmen Imbriella? He can be BSing for all we know. But
Right.
that was his statement.
Yeah, and he was saying he was there when Bucky got the call to go I guess he needed to go to the this area of because like, again the Staten Island there was a diner that was Russo's diner was there, and so anyway they supposedly went over there, and then Carmine had heard what was going on the phone. Anyway, Carmine was saying, if he had went with him, he'd gotten killed too, but they found him slumped over a wheel like he was surprised, and he was trying to get out of the car. And so
And they said
this
Scarpa was in the car at
yes.
that time. It was his crew. He
Hmm.
was in the car when this murder happened.
Yes, exactly. And so, of course, Mikey, being his brother, Mikey was a up and comer, and so, he was angry. He wanted to seek revenge against the Columbos for that, but Paul Castellano told him, no, you can't do it. That Bucky's murder was a internal
It was
Colombo family
Columbo
business.
business.
Hmm.
And and like a guy that understands how the code of the mob work, they said if you kill him, we'll have nothing to do with you. They didn't say we'll kill you.
Hmm.
They said if you kill him, you're basically out of the family.
Right. And even though, and it did cause Paul had some concerns even after that. Mikey said, he wouldn't do anything, but Mikey had been on the list to be made even, then. So this was like in
And he took him off.
82.
He took him off that
Took him
list,
off.
didn't he?
Took him off the list, and because of what happened to his brother. And it's interesting because I know that you that's not necessarily uncommon. You've had instances where I believe in the Lucchese family, they even had it where if you're a boss, you can't be a boss if you had one of your family members killed, and because they were afraid if you got the position of boss, then you might use that to get back at people. So, it's a kind of a situation where, the concern is that, hey, this is going to create some sort of interfamily war. And so, it can have effects even on Mikey, which he had nothing to do with what happened to his brother, but it
But he
derailed him
understood.
for a few
But
years.
he understood. He understood that that was another family. That was their thing and their family.
Yes,
Uh,
as a Colombo family, not the
and
Gambinos.
even he said that's the life.
Hmm.
We lose fathers, we lose brothers. Some people want revenge, but there's a lot of people in the mob history. If you look at them, a lot of
Hmm.
people have had family members. Bilotti was killed,
Hmm.
and Bilotti's
Yep.
brother bit the bullet. That was it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Bilotti's killed in a horrible death, and no
Yeah.
revenge, and that
Mm-mm.
family went on to be the Bilotti went on to be successful.
Well, and Bruno as well in
In
Delicato.
Ducato, yes,
Hmm.
perfect. His father's killed,
Yeah.
and then you have what's his name? Oh, well, shut up, Lee. Okay, Wild Bill Catullo's son.
Yeah. Wild Bill Cthulhu. Yeah.
And that's it. That's the
Yeah.
life you live.
Hmm.
Some people went out and looked for revenge, and usually they didn't. Usually they
Yep.
just knew that was the life.
Yes.
Okay, so he opened up a social club then finally.
Yeah.
Michael D. Leonardo.
Dileonardo. Yeah. Yeah. So this was about around that same time in 80, 81. So, he opened up a social club. And so where they were at in where the veteran friends club, there was all the families were there, in that
And
area
Sammy
instantly.
Gravano and Frankie
Hmm.
DeChico went to that club a lot.
Yep. Hmm.
And
Yep.
bookmaking, loan
Loan
sharking was done
sharking,
there.
gambling. Yep, that's exactly. So that's what he was using it for, and he became successful in it. And then he also did some work in a produce market with Peter Castellano, which was a cousin to Paul. And then so during this time, he started to also get involved in. He got some help from Sammy a little bit, where De Leonardo opened up his own construction company called Metropolitan Stone with Eddie Garofalo. That was Gravano's brother-in-law. So
And you
he
see
was
it, but
getting
now,
involved.
and you see, and this is why when you see this feud going on right now online between Mikey Scars and Sammy Gravano.
Mhm.
At one time, they were pretty close.
Yeah, they were in this Eddie Garofalo. That's another one that Sammy doesn't like him. He would always say he was
That was
his
Sammy's
schemer.
brother-in-law, right?
Right, is his brother-in-law, and Mikey or Michael really saw Eddie as someone that understood the construction business. They both learned a lot from Eddie, and Sammy just doesn't want to give the credit. And so, also, this was kind of when in the 80s, this is when Michael became a shop foreman for the Teamsters Local 282. That was how he started to get into the unions.
Then he got a best friend,
Hmm.
and his best friend was John Gotti
John got.
Jr.
Yep, exactly. Yep, that
A-
was in the mid 80s. Yep.
And he even became the godfather to his son. And
Hmm.
then on top of that, John Gotti Sr. liked him. So he
Yes.
was well liked, well respected. Everybody liked him. He had his that social club seemed to really explode his career, where all
Yep.
these guys he was getting to know everybody at this point in his life. Would you say that's
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it did, and then it helped too with when John Gotti got in power, that he started to have Mikey started coming around to John's social club more.
And
So
you
that
and
was
you
part
and
of
you
it.
can understand at this time that Mikey Dileonardo was he was his club opened up in 80. His brother was killed in 81. He started
Hmm.
meeting all these guys.
Yeah.
So if he wanted to, he probably could have done something.
Yeah.
But he understood that himself. It seemed like he was going on a different. He was going in a different direction than his brother.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't help that the woman he married, who she was related to. She was related to the Gambino underboss, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then we're going to talk about 1985. He gets married
Yeah.
to Tina Marie
Antoinette, Tony
Fapiano,
Marie, Fapiano. Yep.
and the Fapianos is another family with lineage back to Italy.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he married well into that because that was a cousin of Frank DeChico. Tony Marie was, Frank DeChico's cousin, and DeChico's had several people that were in the Gambino family.
yeah, let's look at some of the men that these are the men in her. These aren't. These are people that were related to her, or his
Hmm.
cousins, or somebody. You
Yeah.
have Jackie DeChico. You have Frank. You have I'm sorry, Joseph DeChico. Then you
Hmm.
had Scott Frappiano.
Hmm.
George, I can hardly read these people. So if I
Yeah.
George DeChico, and of
Yeah.
course Mikey Scars. If
Yeah.
I misread
Yeah,
those,
and they didn't show Frank's picture, but Frank was the brother.
well, Frank Frappiano. So I'm taking
Yeah.
Frank Frappiano became friends with Mikey Scars.
Yeah. Yeah. About from there was the marriage in 85, and then that's when they became friends around that time.
Right. Okay, so now he's going good.
Hmm.
So what goes on? So tell me what happened after the Castellano hit went down.
Yeah, so we know that then John Gotti became the boss, and then in April of '86, then we know that Frank DeChico, who had became
Oh,
an
and I just want to
underboss.
say one thing. Remember, people, Mikey Scars was married the same year as the hit.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, and then in his career part, Leonardo was under, Lilo or Lilo Garofalo, but it's different. It's not related to Eddie. And so, anyway, uh, so when So when Gotti becomes boss, then that's when Mikey Scars started reporting to the Ravenite Social Club in Little Italy. So he'd go there 3 or 4 times a week, and then also Mikey Scars. Then, uh, you know, after Garofalo died, then Jackie D'Amico, who's Jackie,
He became part of Jackie D'Amico's crew, didn't he?
he did exactly, and so Jackie knows was his nickname or is his nickname. So anyway, he Jack that crew that Jackie was the capo over was a bunch of old timers. They weren't making a lot of money, and so Mikey was able to get in there and help get money kicked up to Jackie and to the administration. And so, he did a good job of getting money for Jackie's crew, because there are a bunch of old timers. They
And
just had
Jackie the Nose was not known as a guy that made a lot of money on the streets. That was just,
he was a brokester, as they called him.
yeah, and that's it. You'll hear Sammy Gravano talk about it. You'll hear Mikey talk about it, that he just he wasn't that type of guy. A
Yep.
matter of fact, John Gotti used to kind of make fun of him quite a bit.
Yeah.
When they were at the, and I read a few of those stories.
Right.
But he still was a guy that had his own family. He was an old timer.
Yeah, and he was very close to John Gotti. You saw him in a lot of photos together, and
A
Jackie
lot.
was like a person that could joke around with John Gotti. He could just
He could take John Gotti's jokes, and
yeah, exactly. And he's about the only person that could bust John Gotti's balls, to a point. And so they just had that fun relationship, where they could kind of let loose. And so again, Mikey got into a situation that got him close to the boss, and he wasn't just a hang around guy.
well, get out of here. You're kidding me. Sammy said he was a hang around guy.
Yeah.
Okay. So he wasn't a hang around guy.
Right.
Or he just hung around the right people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you read this lineage, it's like Sammy's got some nerve. I'm like, are you kidding me? Dude, Sammy wasn't related to nobody, and he had his fight. One thing about Sammy, he had a fight to get where he got. There was no doubt.
Exactly.
Did he say that Sammy was tough on the streets?
Yeah, he was tough on the street.
And I think even Mikey Scars said that Sammy was tough on the street.
Yeah, he was, but even John Gotti, the Gottis didn't have that lineage either. They
Right.
they weren't even Sicilian, right? They were from Italy, and so and that's in Queens as well. And so there's actually a lot. It's just amazing as you look at these stories and you do all this research. There's a lot of history there between the different crews and everything. They don't necessarily trust one another. Like, you may have a crew, and what's funny is you had people that would work with other families there in Bensonhurst. They knew each other better from the different other families than they would their own family, maybe in the Bronx or whatever.
And another thing that happened, being that when his brother died, and Castellano pulled that back where he couldn't be made, he literally had to wait another 7 years. So when you think about it, if he was made in 81 or 82, I mean, he's ahead of all these guys by the time 88 rolls around. But it's funny though, because he got made with a group of guys, and he got made on December 24th, 1988, right?
Yes, he was, and that was he got
in Mulberry
made.
Street. It was at Joey Carraro's mother's house.
Yeah, Joe Butch Carraro's mother's house. Yep.
And he got made with Bobby Borriello, John Gotti Jr., Dominic Skinny Dom Pizzonia, and Nicholas Sorsa. The men stood there with family capo Jackie the Nose was there. Gene Gotti was there. And the guys that sat at the table were Salvatore Gravano and Patsy Conti. Those are some heavy hitter names right there, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's interesting that the one name missing is John Gotti himself, and that was actually done on purpose, because Gene Gotti was there, but John Gotti wasn't, because he didn't feel it was appropriate to be the one to do that, because his son was getting made that day. So didn't want the nepotism or whatever, and so that's why he had Sammy the Bull administer that.
Right. Well, you could definitely understand that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so once he's made, he really takes off after that, doesn't he?
Yes, exactly. And so he's still a young guy. probably 32 or so, because he's born in 55. So 32. So he's with the Teamsters Trucking Union. He's he's making a lot of money
And
for
that's like
Jackie knows.
282, that trucking unit.
Yep.
Yeah, that was very powerful at that time too, that union.
Yep, exactly. And then, then Sammy took over the Teamsters after DB was killed, and so Mikey's made a foreman for the trucking union. And so, yeah, he started and working with Eddie, like we said, and then,
Mikey Scars is very lucky that he never became. Oh my! No, my dog doing the damn bathroom in the back. Thank you,
yeah.
Polly. Okay.
Oh God.
So he's lucky he never became partners with Sammy. You got to give
Yeah,
Mikey
I
one
know.
for that
That's
because
what's
we wouldn't
amazing.
even be talking about this right now.
No, not at all. And so yeah, and then Sammy flips in '91, and then John Gotti had Mikey take over Sammy's construction rackets, and so he was told to work with Eddie Garofalo, and then what you'd have is Jackie D'Amico. Jackie knows was allowed. He could go visit John Gotti in prison, and then basically, he got the word from John to tell Mikey to have the construction rackets.
Okay, so so that's 99. That's 92. It's a conviction. Sammy flipped and became a rat, and
Yeah.
and then a lot of bad things started happening. Let's
Yeah.
go pick it up from there because one of the things that happened in the mid 90s, and people don't realize this, but Chris Paciello, who we did a video on, there was a little tiff between Wild Bill Catullo of the Colombo family and between Mikey Dileonardo. And what was interesting there, they sat down, they came to the conclusion that they were going to let Chris Paciello decide who he wanted to go with, and Paciello went with the Colombos.
Yep, exactly. And so yeah, I mean, Mikey Scars had claimed him because he was a Staten Island, and he said, "Hey, that Chris belonged to us," because he was a Gambino mob associate. But anyway,
imagine that though, a Bath Avenue boy that was involved in shooting a woman in the face goes down, and everybody wants a piece of him because he's making so much money.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And Wild Bill was the one that claimed him, and finally, what ended up happening is Alley Boy Persico was brought in to settle this, and Chris made that decision. Apparently, Alley Boy was pretty persuasive, and he chose the Colombos.
And then in 2000, he had his first indictment in Atlanta. Why don't you talk about that? Mikey Scars did.
Yeah. So you see there in the mid '90s, Michael Dileonardo starts getting involved, and he had some tattoo parlors, bakeries. He had a lot of legitimate businesses, also some of the bars, clubs, and restaurants. So anyway, in 2000, he gets indicted on trying to extort cash payments from
Scores.
2 strip clubs. Yep, you had Scores.
Yeah.
Was there in Manhattan, and then you had the Gold Club in Atlanta, and so what was interesting about the Gold Club in Atlanta is that it's like one of the only fully nude clubs in, I guess, in the East Coast or maybe in Atlanta. But anyway, this was kind of an upscale strip club, and so you had all these famous celebrities that would.
So these were fancy naked women. These were high class naked women.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You had a lot of.
But these weren't the
VIP
worn out
rooms
ones
and
that had three babies, and these were just the young hot ones. Okay.
Right. Yeah, you didn't have the midget strippers or whatever, or the one-legged.
So James,
strippers.
is there something you're not telling us about
No,
midget
there's a rumor in Wichita Falls, Texas. There's a
Okay.
midget strippers. I don't know if it's true, but
Oh yeah, you know if it's true. Cut it out. Okay.
No, but yeah, but what happened was that so you had Patrick Ewing, you had Andrew Jones, you had a bunch of wrestlers and athletes, even
And Madonna.
that would go to this club, and they got in trouble over this. They had to, and so they were saying that Michael was extorting cash payments from these clubs, and so
But he was
uh,
wasn't he acquitted on all those charges?
yep, he was acquitted. There's a 4-month trial, and he got acquitted. And they even threatened to bring. They said, "Oh yeah, we're going to bring John Gotti JR. Down to testify against you." And government was trying to do all they could, and then even moving having the trial in Atlanta instead of because it could have been in Manhattan because of scores. Art could be in Atlanta. They wanted to do it in Atlanta, and no one thought that Leonardo would get acquitted of that because you're going into the Bible Belt, you're going into the South, and he got acquitted.
I can
And there was
understand
no
it.
funny business either. There wasn't any payoffs of a jury or anything like that we know
Well,
of.
that's the funny thing when you go to trial. It's the ones that you don't think you're going to win that you win,
Yeah, he
and
did
it's
not
the
think
ones that you think you're
he
going to
was
beat that you don't.
right. He didn't think he would he would win that, and he did.
So in 2001, Peter Gotti's made boss, right?
Yep.
And Dileonardo got indicted again, this time for racketeering, extortion, and witness tampering in the murder of Fred Weiss. Why don't
Yeah,
you
and
go over that murder?
yeah, and this was even more serious, and so yeah, and it's a long story, but what I'll try to summarize it. So what we're told is that John Gotti Sr. asked Mikey Scars to work with Joe Watts. They wanted to take out Fred Weiss. And according to Michael, this was at this Fat Downs Club in Staten Island with Jackie and the rest of the crew. And so anyway, he finally talks to Joe Watts and said, "Hey, we got a piece of work." And so Weiss had been involved in the garbage industry in Staten Island, and so he was pretty big. But anyway, there was another guy named Angelo Pazioni that was both. He was partners with Fred Weiss. They had gotten indicted, and so Jimmy Brown ran the Trade Waste Association, was concerned, because Jimmy Brown kind of controlled all those rackets. He was concerned that Fred Weiss was going to cooperate, and so Angelo apparently was got in Jimmy Brown's ear and was saying, "Hey, this Fred Weiss guy you can't trust. He's going to spread some secrets," and so he became a liability. And so they had a talk with John Gotti. John Gotti Senior was in prison at the time. So anyway, they said, basically they need to get rid of him, and so Mikey was instructed after that night to get together with a guy named Fat Dom Borghese, which he did in his club. Basically they had to dig a hole so that they were going to bury Fred Weiss when he gets killed. And so part of this was they couldn't ever get his routine down. Talking about Fred Weiss, they wanted to kill him.
Right. They
He
kept
was in.
missing him. Sammy
They kept.
Gravano talks about this in, I believe, Jimmy Brown,
Yeah.
and he kept getting away. He was hard to get.
Yeah, it's hard to nail down. I know they tried different ways to get him. And so anyway, there was a soldier with the Cavalcantes that had a house, and so they said there was a job or something, and they wanted Fred Weiss to come over there, basically to, he thought he would have a job. And so anyway, Mikey was instructed by Joe Watts to go with his brother-in-law, Frankie Papiano, to stay in the yard, pose as a construction worker, because it was this huge house that was under construction. And so basically the thing is that they were going to go out, find Fred Weiss, bring him back to the house, lure him into the house, and then Joe Watts was going to be there and kill him. But again, Fred Weiss never showed up, so the plot failed. But a couple of days later, the Cavalcante families actually found him and killed him as a favor to Gotti Senior.
Well, you could be a tough guy to get killed, but they did catch up to him, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. And these were some pretty big names with that New Jersey family. This was so basically. you had Frank Scarabino, but this was where Vinny Ocean ended up flipping.
Yeah, because what happened was Mikey Scars got arrested again, didn't he?
Yes. Yep. He got arrested for this, and so that there's a just everyone started flipping on this, and
And at this
so
time, Mikey was worth a lot of money.
yes,
He had a lot of money out in the street.
yes.
And so let's pick it up from there. He was arrested in June and he was worth a lot of money.
Yeah, so he was arrested June, because now he was also getting into stocks and bonds. So he was doing all those pump and dump schemes that all the families were involved in
Back
it.
then, they were all
Hmm.
doing it with these
A
stockbroker
lot of,
companies.
yeah, exactly. And so the Gambinos around this time had a change in the administration, and Gotti actually wanted Mikey Scars to be the consigliere, but he declined. And so Peter Gotti became the new boss so you remember June 10th, 2002 is when Gotti died. And so
Didn't
they
they have
just
like a committee of
they had a
bosses
committee that was kind of running stuff. Yeah, I believe Junior was in that. Peter Gotti, and then the Carrazzo brothers were involved in it. So they ended up putting Jojo Carrazzo as the consigliere, and so even though he's a Brooklyn, the Carrazzos are from Brooklyn. They're from the Canarsie area, and so they didn't get along with the people in Bensonhurst, and so there was just this beef that had been there between Mikey Scars and the Carrazzos, and so anyway, this was kind of when all the stuff, basically the
and
Carrazzos,
this is little Nicky
little
right
Nick.
here.
Mm-hmm.
And just so people know, and this is Jojo and this is Jojo Carrazzo,
JoJo. Yep.
and that's two of the people that he was having trouble with, especially with his money.
Right, because they stopped all of Mikey's income, and according to Mikey Scars, is both the mob related and the non-mob related, because he had legitimate businesses as well, and he couldn't get any, couldn't get any money, and so and
And Peter,
then
got, he said Peter Gotti was involved too.
yeah, he sold him out on the stock market scam because I guess Peter got arrested, and then Mikey had got arrested, just a few days later in June. And remember, all this is, you had John Gotti Sr. that passed away. Then, Peter gets arrested. Michael gets arrested again. And so, but during this time, Mikey was having some issues with, he was
With women.
struggling with women and gambling.
Yes, and we're not going to get into the women thing because
Right.
I don't feel like dragging his son into it, or
No.
that's kind of a private family thing. So we're just gonna we'll just say he had another wife.
Hmm.
They didn't like the fact. Some people in the family didn't like the fact that he was just this woman and not with his wife. But you know
Right.
what? They all do it. It makes no sense to me why people were thinking like
Yeah,
that. Uh,
that's true. And so, but also during this time, a lot of the people that worked with Mikey, it could have been able to help him, like Eddie Garofalo. He was arrested. I believe Louis Valero. He got arrested. Frank Fabiano. He was arrested, and so all these people around him got arrested, and so sounds like the
Some of them,
Carrazos ended.
okay, so Mikey, okay, so basically, Mikey said he had a weak moment. It broke
Hmm.
his heart when he was shelved. He decided to testify in 2002. The only person that knows whether that is true or not is Mikey Dileonardo. What
Yeah,
the
and
exact reason was.
yeah, but he's saying that part of it was he was kept on saying, well, that they were supposed to take care of his girlfriend when he was in prison, and they were supposed to take care of his ex-wife uh, and his son while he was in prison. That's what Mikey's saying,
And there was
and but
but there was a very special bond there between John Gotti Jr. and
hmm
the son.
yes,
He was
exactly, and
friends with
that
and the wife. He was good to them, very good to them.
right. Right. And so what ended up happening was is that they would never so he'd send letters and they would come back and say no, we can't help you, and then eventually one time it got so bad that he finally contacted George DeChico. You remember DeChico was actually a cousin of of
The
his
Frappianos.
ex-wife.
Yeah.
And so George asks, he wants to know so he talks to the Peter and look to the Carrazos, wants to know why they're doing this to his nephew, and the administration basically tells George DeChico to mind his own business, and then they say, well, the girlfriend should just go on welfare, and then right after that, this associate that worked with um, Mikey Scars named Noel uh, Modica sent a message to Michael through the girlfriend that he had been shelved, and so to get the message from his girlfriend was unconscionable to Mikey Scars. So no one actually told him directly from like it wasn't like that JoJo or someone from the administration did. They
And we
kind
got to
of went,
remember one thing before okay, we're telling the story from this point of view.
yes,
We don't know if this story is true. Only a couple of
right,
people surrounded about on it know whether it's true, but we're going to put it out there because this is what's in the records. This was what was given to the, basically the FBI. They, a lot of people went along with this story, uh,
yeah.
but I'm not going to say it's true or false.
Right. And Junior, I know in Junior's book, he said that he felt disrespectful and refused to support Mikey's girlfriend because, there was the wife and, he just didn't feel it was right. And then, there were some other issues, like you said about Mikey's son was close to Junior. And maybe that's why Junior had that emotional attachment in this because of the son. I don't know, but, it
Here's
really.
how close they were. I mean, wherever you seen Junior back then, you did not see John A. Light. You seen Mikey
Hmm.
Scars.
Yeah,
And John A. Light in this one, I believe, was underneath the table. But
right,
but you did not, this is who he really ran with. And they were
right. Well,
together all the time. So
yeah,
there was a special bond, a special relationship, godparents,
yeah,
uh, the children, family friends, and
yeah,
they just didn't agree at that time with the fear that he was having.
right.
But
Yeah, because they were close to the family, and then
we all know that mobsters don't have affairs,
yeah, and Carrazos, I think they were accusing Mikey of not kicking up what he should have, so they were saying he was robbing the family, and Mikey denies that, but that's what
so
you
what do
know,
they do? Keep all his money?
that's what it sounds like, but I believe the government may have got a lot of it too when he cooperated. So, we know that in 2002, he had a suicide attempt, and there's a couple of different stories on what happened. One was the thought of having to testify against Junior Gotti, and others close to him led him to that. But then other source said that was his son's anger at him for becoming a government informant prompted the attempt. So I don't know what the true story is on the
And
suicide
if you
attempt.
listen to the son's very honest and says, yes, he's
Hmm.
angry. He says to this day, he still has issues with it. So there's a
Mm.
lot, and this is one thing we don't talk about that we have to remember when someone informs, and it goes for all the informants, they have immediate family that have to deal with the person informing is doing.
Right.
And a lot of times they don't want to go into witness protection and stuff.
Right.
Or they, in his case, this was two women divided, so it wasn't going to
Hmm.
happen. So he wound up. So then what happened was Mikey wound up testifying against Peter Gotti,
Hmm.
Big Lou, Valerie. How do you say that last name?
Louis Big Valerio.
And then you got Frank Fappiano,
Hmm.
Richard V. Gotti, Richard G. Gotti,
Yeah.
Michael Yanati, who is one of the ones they said that shot Curtis Sliwa.
Uh-huh.
And then you also we can't forget what's his name? I can't think of his name right now. One of the guys that got made with him, he testified. Two of the guys that got made with him,
Hmm.
he also testified against.
Yeah. Well, John Gotti Jr. We know.
Yeah, and
And
I can't.
oh, you're talking about yeah. I can't
The
remember
guy
the.
that shot the couple,
Yeah.
the ones that were robbing the they put him there, and Ronald Trujillo, one eye.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and then even did stuff like against Alfonso Persico, Jackie D. Ross, and because
Yeah,
they were that
yeah.
trial that was for the murder of
William Catullo.
Wild Bill. Hmm.
Yeah, yep. And the case, and that case ended in mistrial, the second
Yep,
trial, and they both
were
would be
convicted in the
convicted in the
second
second
trial. Yeah.
trial.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
Michael Dileonardo tested a record 15 times that he testified, and
Yeah.
that's a record,
Yeah.
more than any other made mafia member to date.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's something I'm sure he's not proud of, but
Right.
it did happen. You can't change history.
Right.
Okay. And so in 2011, the judge gave him time served, 36 months, released him from confinement, and he and his second family are now in federal. Well, we know that's we don't we know that Mikey's on here now, and Mikey has a
Yeah.
show.
Right.
And when you see this and you see all this great, okay, we've been here an hour. We started in Sicily. God, I don't believe it took an hour to go through this. But
Yeah.
you could start in Italy, and then we get to this point.
Hmm.
And so Mikey Scars he has his show.
Yeah.
He doesn't attack the Gottis, but he has a lot of issues with Sammy.
Hmm.
Why do you think he has the issues with Sammy?
Well, I mean, because he was there. I mean, when we go through all this story, we see where Mikey was there from the mid '80s with Gotti. Pretty much during Gotti's whole reign. So he was there and would know what was going on. So he has a dispute against it. But also, he was friends with Sammy, and that relationship soured apparently, and so I think there's some personal. It's very personal between the two of them. So it's more than just the mafia piece of it. It's a personal
I think
conflict.
one of the things that started this, well, I'm sure there was some stuff before then,
Hmm.
because he had to listen to Sammy tell all these stories. And
Yeah.
so he's around Sammy, and he knows a lot of these stories Sammy's telling, and he
Hmm.
hears Sammy embellishing the stories.
Yeah.
Anybody that checks his 302s, you could see that he embellishes quite a few stories.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think when he called him just a hang around guy,
Yeah. I mean, that's just not.
it's like, you made this dude, Sammy. You were sitting there. You made him.
Yeah.
How can you call him a hang around guy?
Yeah.
So that means that everybody you made that day are hang around guys, Sammy?
Hmm. Well, and
Not
I mean, Sammy's even today on his live, he's doubling down on one of his lies that he's continuing regarding F. Lee Bailey, and I can't find any evidence of
well, F. Lee
that.
Bailey, and we'll do that for another show, but that's
Yeah,
it.
it'll be another show, but I'm just
Yeah,
saying it's
but
just
no, that's
every
very,
week he's
no, yeah,
doing
because
more and
me and you were
more.
talking about this before we did this show, and it's very interesting
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, what I like to dive into, I'm going to try to. I was thinking that maybe we're going to dive into the murder of his brother. It's a very interesting story,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of things I just didn't talk about that I researched and found about that murder.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I was thinking that maybe we'll do something about that.
Hmm.
And that's the thing, when we do these stories, like we just went through his lineage from 100 years, more than 100 years, 130 years.
Yeah.
And you see it. And if we miss anything here, I apologize. But, we had all these names that we had to put down here and all this research that we had to do for this story.
Hmm.
And I hope that we did it good. I don't know
Yeah.
until people say something. And I kept, oh gosh almighty, I've been ordered.
Hmm.
We have somebody taking care of our work now.
Hmm.
And I forgot to tell people to please, I should have said this at the very beginning, and I
Yeah.
did not. Please sub to this channel. I would really appreciate it. Please sub, hit the like. If you have not hit the reminder bell, please hit the reminder bell. That's very important. It tells you when our next show is coming up, and it's greatly appreciated. And we do a lot of work on these, and nobody has to do this. It's up to you. If you want to help support this channel, there's a Cash App. There's a little heart underneath here. You can donate. or PayPal. And if you can't, no problem at all. And that's pretty much it.
Yep.
Are you happy with the show?
Yeah, very much so, and so I appreciate everyone's comments. I enjoy responding to them, and most of the time that people are being fair and gentlemen. So I appreciate that, gentle women.
And what I like about the show too is when you go back and you learn all that lineage that you had no idea.
Yeah, didn't have any idea on that.
I mean, and it's amazing because here's this, it just comes to a halt. I mean, it didn't come to the halt because he testified. It comes to the halt because the mob basically died off.
Yeah, exactly.
You still have mafia out there, but families don't want to follow. I'll give you Mikey Scars' son probably doesn't want to follow his path because he knows where it's going to go.
Right.
Prison now, and so who wants to get involved with that anymore?
Right. And you have options that you wouldn't, generations before. There's more opportunity to go to college and do other things
and there's no cameras. There's no,
right.
We're in a different world now than that world probably ended in 1990 when the internet came out in 96, I believe, when it really started.
Yep.
That was it. That was the end.
Yep.
I mean,
agree.
It lasted a little bit. Now they do things now, but it's totally different. It's total racketeering now.
Right.
It's not that old mob stuff. But anyway, thank you, my man.
Thank you.
People, please hit the subscribe, hit the like, the reminder bell. Appreciate it so much. And thank you very much. Take care. I hope you enjoy this.